FPL has been out for almost a week now, so after quite a lot more research, I wanted to share my updated FPL draft ahead of game week 1. Hey everyone, Sam here, otherwise known as FPL Pricey. In today's video, I'll be looking at my updated team draft ahead of game week 1. In the meantime, if you could leave a like and subscribe to the channel, that'd be greatly appreciated. I'm really close to 4,000 now, so it'd be amazing to hit that before the start of the season, but only if you enjoy the video, of course. Let's start off by looking at my goalkeepers and defense in combination. A quick word on chip strategy. I'm not currently set up for a bench boost in game week 1, but there are minor tweaks I can make to this draft that would make me pretty happy with bench boost game week 1. So let me know in the comments below if that would be interesting to you, and I'll make another video. Hit the notification bell as well, and then you'll get notified when that comes out. The other thing I want to mention on chip strategy is I'm currently kind of looking at free hit in game week 6 and wildcard in game week 13. The only reason I mention that is mainly for the wildcard in game week 13's factor, that a lot of the players that I'm picking need to have that longevity that I won't be shuffling in and out and using loads of transfers on for a long period of time. So it's quite a while to wait before wildcarding. So a lot of what I'm doing is farming expected minutes and hoping for a more secure base to build off of and use transfers in more attacking positions. Starting off in goal, I've gone with Sanchez alongside Kinski. Kinski's just the 4 million keeper that I think is most likely to start now. He's fighting it out with Vicario for that number 1 spot, so I would say it's probably a 20% chance he starts the season, but I think he's probably the best keeper to have on the bench at 4 million right now. My starting keeper would be Sanchez at the moment, and I want to just bring in another graphic whilst I can. Solio Analytics and Rob TFPL are doing some fantastic work this year. Definitely go check out their channels on X and Blue Sky as well. They've come up with the team clean sheet projections using market odds for the first 6 game weeks. Now, as you can see here, Chelsea rank number 4, just behind the likes of Man City, Arsenal, Liverpool, in terms of the expected clean sheets for the first 6 game weeks. Their opening 6 game weeks of fixtures are also pretty good as well if you just look on the ticker, but longer term than that, all the way through to game week 13, it's a really nice run as well. The only really difficult fixture in there is Liverpool at home in game week 7. Outside of that, all the way till when I want to wildcard for that big fixture swing in game week 13, I'm very happy to own Chelsea's number 1 keeper. So with that in mind, Sanchez to me looks pretty nailed in. He did really well in the Club World Cup, and I think he solidified his spot as that number 1 keeper. Not obviously 100% confident, and I'll reassess closer to the game week 1 deadline, but for now, he's in, and the clean sheet odds, the underlying defensive data was all looking pretty positive for the first few game weeks. Into defense, and what I've gone with at the moment is 5 centre-backs, which I only really realised when I started recording this. But like I said, I'm really trying to farm expected minutes and create longevity in my backline where I don't really ever need to use a transfer at all. All of these players have great defensive records in terms of last season's clean sheets and underlying data, but also great records in terms of injuries, and their expected minutes are very high as well. So I think it's unlikely that I'll need to use transfers on any of these players, especially the 3 that I expect to start most weeks. That is Van Dijk, Gvardiol and Milenkovic. All 3 of which would have gotten a massive bump last season from the defensive contributions. Gvardiol less so, but now that we expect him to be playing centre-back rather than left-back, I actually expect him to get more of a defensive contribution bump this season anyway. And of course, he scored very highly, the highest scoring defender in the game last season. I think the fact that Gvardiol and Van Dijk have come in at 6 million is a tad too cheap, especially when weighting in those extra points for the contributions, which would have taken them to around 165 to 170 points last season with those added in. If they can match this season, then I think as far as 6 million players go across the entire database, including midfielders and attackers, they're one of the most assured picks in terms of those returns that you can possibly get. There aren't really many other 6 million assets anywhere else in the game that I could reliably bet on getting 150 plus points. So Van Dijk and Gvardiol will tick along nicely, and given that I'm waiting until game week 13 to wildcard with this draft, that's what I want. I want that reliability, and I'm happy with drip feeding points. The odd goal, the odd clean sheet here or there as well, very, very helpful. Milenkovic, very similar logic. locked in for minutes, good on the underlying attacking data, and got a fair few goals last season, gets up for corners, obviously massive unit in the air, and you've got the defensive numbers that back it up as well. If I go back, obviously I talked about the top four already, but Nottingham Forest just creeping in at number 5 there. You're expecting a few clean sheets in the first 6 game weeks too. There is a drop-off in game week 4. That's because I believe it's Arsenal they play in game week 4, just double checking here. It is. So that week, I'm not expecting a clean sheet, and therefore I need another rotation defender to come in. And that brings in Mark Gahey. Now, this could be Chris Richards if Gahey leaves Crystal Palace before game week 1. But at the moment, it looks like Gahey might be secure there. If he is there, 4.5 million for a player that will normally be on my bench, but he gets a fair few defensive contribution points. Crystal Palace aren't a bad defence. And crucially, in game week 4, they've got a great chance of a clean sheet at home to Sunderland, I believe it is. That's correct. And that can be an easy trade-in for Milenkovic, giving me a 42% chance of a clean sheet rather than a 15. So across the first 6 game weeks, I'm pretty much covered. They rotate in and out fairly nicely. And if Gahey ever needs to come in because of an injury, Crystal Palace are generally not a bad defence either. Esteve, I think that's how you pronounce it. My Burnley defender, 4.0. Not planning on playing him ever, really. But if injuries were to strike and I needed to rely on that final defender, that 5th defender, I think he's as good an option at 4 million as you can possibly get. I'm not expecting many clean sheets, but Burnley's defensive data in the Championship was very good, and he's locked in at 90 minutes, might get a few defensive contribution points. I think he was averaging about 8 on the CBIT, those clearances, blocks, interceptions, tackles last season in a league which Burnley massively dominated. So I think he'll go comfortably above 10 on average this season, and therefore get a few of those 2-pointers additionally to the 1 or 2 points that you normally expect. So his floor's a little bit higher. And at 4 million, having a locked-in player last on your bench most weeks is absolutely fine as far as I can tell. Moving into the midfield, and what I've gone for again is that reliability and a high confidence in each of these players. There are other picks that I really like the look of. Wirtz isn't currently in my draft, but I love the look of him. I think he's going to be an incredible option. Kudus as well at 6.5 million is interesting to a lot of people. I just want to see a couple of game weeks worth of data from them. Wirtz, I'm tempted to maybe reshuffle and get in from the off because I am confident that he's going to be incredible. But Liverpool can't score 5 or 6 goals every single game. I mean, they might, considering the amount of signings they've brought in. But you'd imagine that the goals are going to be shared around a little bit. And Wirtz, he might get 10 goals this season, but Salah's probably still going to get the majority. Ekitike coming in might get 15 to 20 as well. And you've also potentially now got Alexander Isak at time of recording as a speculative buy as well, all going to take goal share. And Liverpool will improve as an attack with all of them, but are they going to improve enough that they get 100 plus goals and each of these players all score 15 to 20 goals? I think Salah's the most likely. And given that we've got all of that data on him over seasons and seasons and seasons, he's an output merchant. I think for me, having him in my game week 1 draft just makes the most sense, just for that safety net, that security. And he's an obvious game week 1 captain, as well as a great captain for a number of other game weeks on that stretch as well. I'm not overexposed in Liverpool right now. I haven't gone for the triple up with Wirtz. Like I said, I am tempted, but I'd need to find another 0.5 million somewhere else in this draft, maybe by downgrading my keeper or Milenkovic by 0.5, then I might be able to upgrade Eze to a Wirtz. So let me know if that's appealing to you in the comments, because that is something that I'm pretty tempted by. Moving away from Liverpool for now, let's talk about Palmer very quickly. Yes, okay, he went off the boil a little bit at the back end of last season, but the data has always been incredible. He's a 90-minute man on penalties, and like I mentioned with Sanchez, the opening few fixtures are incredible. And if I wanted to hold on to him for the entire 12 weeks, it's pretty easy to do so as well, considering the long-term fixtures. So he ticks all of the boxes. And again, it's one of those things, I've got a high level of confidence in him, whereas the alternative there would be Saka. I love him as a player, and I think he's an incredible FPL asset as well. However, the starting fixtures aren't quite as nice. And if Gyökeres signs, which looks very, very likely now, he might, in fact, I'd probably argue he probably will take penalties off of Saka, which dents Saka's appeal ever so slightly, and might just put Palmer one notch above him in the pecking order when prioritising my game week 1 draft. In combination with the fixtures, at times Saka will be a great pick, but I'm worried if he does lose penalties, which I think is likely considering Gyökeres's penalty record and the fact that Saka is, well, this might be a bit cliche, but he is quite a nice guy. He will probably give it to Gyökeres if he asks. So I imagine he'll lose those. That puts Palmer ahead of him for me at the start of the season, but at times Saka will be an option. The other benefit with Palmer is he's 0.5 more expensive than Saka, so if it looks like Saka's the incredible option that we know he can be, then you can easily transfer across, whereas the reverse of that is harder to do unless you've got money in the bank. The other thing with Palmer is you can then access any other midfielder bar Salah in the game. So you can get to Wirtz very quickly if it becomes obvious that he is an essential pick. And you can get to, well, any other option that you can possibly think of. So Salah, Palmer, for me, are currently in all of my drafts. I haven't found a draft I like without them, but that's not to say that Palmer is an absolute lock. You might be able to spread that money across. Moving across to Eze, he's a player that I'm just very, very fond of as an FPL pick. I've got great memories with him. He does get injured a little bit much for my liking, and he never really gets through a whole 38 game week season without an injury, but as long as he can stay fit, and it's not like he gets injured all the time either, like I don't want to over egg it, but as long as he can stay fit, he's a 90-minute man who has penalty share, who's on set pieces, and great underlying attacking data for a midfielder. He does tick all of those boxes just at a cheaper price. So I'm willing to take a bit more of a gamble on the injury record and the idea that Palace just fundamentally won't score as many goals as a Chelsea or a Liverpool, of course, given his price point at 3 million cheaper than Palmer. So I really like him. It's a price point that has a lot of players in and around that I really like the look of. So he's not locked in. Like I said, I can probably find the money to get to Wirtz instead if I can find 0.5 elsewhere in my squad. But I think given this exact structure, Eze ticks all of those boxes. He's secure. I can rely on him for a stretch of game weeks. Even if the fixtures aren't amazing, I still expect him to return pretty well. So Eze's in at the moment. Next to him is Rodgers, another player that I'm expecting 90 minutes from every single week. He doesn't have penalties that we know of at the moment, but Ollie Watkins has never really been that impressive penalty-wise for Villa anyway. And Tielemans is currently the player I'd most expect to take them. Rodgers, considering the first season he had, I wouldn't be massively surprised if at some point he stood up and said, look, can I have a crack at them? Maybe, but I'm not expecting him to have penalties, just FYI. Rodgers is a player that I expect data to improve on this season. He's 90 minutes. Villa's fixtures for the opening few game weeks are absolutely incredible. If we move across here, the first, in fact, all the way through to game week 9, I would say is probably the best in the league as a batch. Newcastle in game week 1, not ideal. But after that, they've got 2 promoted clubs, a number of teams that I'd expect them to score a couple of goals against before they go up to game week 9, where they have Man City and Liverpool, which admittedly are more difficult. But Rodgers, for me, although he's 7 million, although he won't be that budget pick that we loved last season, I think he's a very secure own that you can rely on to churn out points week in, week out. And he won't get defensive contributions. He probably won't be on penalties, but I still like him enough as a pick at 7 million. So one that isn't completely locked in, but I am relatively happy for a long-term strategy. Like I said, if I'm wildcarding in game week 13, I need players that I've got a high level of confidence on the expected minutes for. Rodgers is going nowhere in that starting lineup, and I expect the data to get a little bit better this season as well. Over to the final one, that 6.5 million option, Ndiaye. Now, this is the interesting one because I really like Elliot Anderson at 5.5 million, but I'm not confident enough, I don't think, to be starting him week in, week out. If I was, I might go with a 3-5-2 with Anderson, save that 1 million there, and then I could upgrade Eze to Wirtz. So that's a combination I don't mind, but it would mean that I have 2 Nottingham Forest players starting every single week, and when I get to game week 4, I'd have to start one of them against Arsenal. So the reason I've not gone with Anderson is because with just Milenkovic as my Forest player, I can sub Gahey in and then bench Milenkovic. Whereas if I've got Anderson, I currently don't have a third striker that I'm confident that I can bring in, or another defender I can bring in for Anderson. So I'd have to play him against Arsenal, which isn't ideal. Whereas with Ndiaye, for 1 million more, I've got a penalty taker who gets 80 plus minutes a game. He's also been known to get the odd defensive contribution as well, by the way. And Everton's fixtures look really good to start the season too. So I don't think he's a lock at 6.5 million. You could look at Kudus, and I'm not ruling it out entirely. You've also got Rodri and Rice, who I'm relatively interested in as well. But Ndiaye, having that extra benefit of penalties is kind of tipping me towards him right now. I'll do some more thinking on it though. That's more of a price point position of 6.5 million or under, but Ndiaye takes it for me right now. I realise that I haven't really spoken about Arsenal players just yet, but a couple of options that I've got here to manoeuvre is I could look at a Gabriel or a Saliba instead of a Gvardiol. They're not so good on the defensive contribution points, and the fixtures to start the season aren't quite as nice, which is putting me off slightly. Or I could look at, instead of Ndiaye, Declan Rice, for instance, who I expect to be a pretty good FPL pick this season, considering he got about 10 or 11 XGI last season, got a few attacking returns as well to go with that. And the defensive contribution points aren't looking too shabby for him either. So he could be a 150 to 160 point player. So at 6.5 million, I quite like the look of him. And he nearly made it into this draft as well instead of Ndiaye. I could look at Saka instead of Palmer, but I'm also interested to see what the dynamic switch will be if Gyökeres signs. If he signs, then this draft might move around just a little bit, where I shift a little bit more fund into the attacking line, and I might go for Gyökeres from the off. So to wrap up the video, adding in my forward line and my captaincy as well. Right now it's on Salah with a vice of Palmer. I think that's fairly sensible, but we'll have a captaincy video before the start of the season. My forward line is pretty cheap right now. I've gone with a 7.5 and a 6.5. It's kind of covering the price points a little bit because I like a number of the 7.5 million options. Solanke's the one I've gone with right now. I'm not convinced on João Pedro enough to double up on Chelsea just yet, but I'm open to the idea. Obviously, they've got a great run of fixtures, but João Pedro won't have penalties this season, and I'm not completely confident he gets 90 every single week. Solanke, I'm a little bit more confident on. Now, not only are the fixtures really good to start the season, but there's a high likelihood he takes penalties with Son either out of the door and going off to the MLS, or potentially not starting every single week anyway. Solanke, I've talked about in other videos, but under Thomas Frank, I expect him to do very well. Thomas Frank's great at getting those high XG chances to his strikers, and Solanke's historically a pretty good finisher as well. So I want Solanke in my Game Week 1 draft if at all possible, but that's not ruling out other 7.5 million options. So I'm open to alternatives, but that Game Week 1 fixture against Burnley and the run after Man City in Game Week 2's out of the way is also looking pretty healthy. Strand Larsen's the 6.5 million forward I've gone with. I do have that 0.5 in the bank to go for Evan Nilsson, which is tempting, but I've downgraded that position since my last video because Strand Larsen looks very likely to take penalties for Wolves now. He got 14 goals last season, 18 attacking returns in total, I believe, and the data wasn't bad at all. And he also wasn't the talisman last season. Whereas now Cunha's gone, I expect him to maybe take a step up, become the talisman more often, and that data might skew upwards in his favour just that little bit. With penalties as well, with him being that focal point of attack, I really like Strand Larsen. And although the Game Week 1 fixture is looking pretty disgusting against Man City, after that, you've got a great run. Bournemouth in red seems harsh, considering they've lost a lot of their defenders. Everton, Newcastle, Leeds, Spurs, Brighton, Sunderland, Burnley, Fulham, all the way through to Game Week 10. And I'll go back to that longevity point as well, again, because I'm looking at wildcarding later. He's a striker that I would be relatively confident of ticking along nicely for 10 or so game weeks. So I might not need to use a transfer to get rid of him. Obviously, issues will occur. I'll need to use transfers somewhere in my 15 at some point, but I'm hoping that the only transfers I really need to use are for players that just explode out of nowhere and become absolutely impossible to ignore, or injuries. And there are no minutes risks in this 11 as far as I can tell. There might be one that I'm not aware of, but all of these players are very locked in, and I've got a couple of bench defenders that can come in times of need if I really need to. He can play any week. They're in a good enough team that he could keep a clean sheet or could get defensive contributions. Esteve might get me a 3 or a 4 pointer if I really need it. And my bench striker is admittedly a 4.5 burner spot that I don't expect to get any minutes whatsoever. That is probably my biggest issue with this draft right now. But considering the expected minutes on all of these players and the long-term fixtures of most of them, I'm relatively confident that I won't need that third bench option all that often. And because I'm not looking at bench boosting until about game week 9, 10, 11, 12, before I wildcard, then hopefully I will be able to bank a couple of transfers up to that point and just maneuver that with 1 or 2 free transfers to get myself a 15 that I can bench boost with at a later point. Now, let me know what you thought of this draft in the comments below. If you could leave a like and subscribe to the channel, that would be greatly appreciated as well. And if you wanted to see my bench boost game week 1 version of this draft, drop a comment below. Leave that notification bell on, and if I get enough interest, I'll post one and you'll get notified as soon as it comes out.